welcome back to the Red Sofa. I'm here with Christopher Ludwig, who's the Chief Content Officer at Automotive Logistics. Chris, thank you for being on the Red Sofa. We've been at Digital Strategies in Nashville, great couple of days of interaction and conversations. We've touched upon data, AI, cybersecurity, compliance. What are the key issues that you're sensing from an industry perspective of some of the key areas that the industry is looking at?
Thanks, Riyad. Well, first of all, let me just say how weird it feels to be on this side of the Red Sofa. It's completely different sat on this side answering questions. So my sympathy to all of the guests that I've brought here previously. But thank you for that. And I think there's a couple of things we can break that down into. I mean, on the one hand, of course, we started the event with a time lapse, if you like, of all the crises that we've seen over the last 5-6 years. Take COVID, semiconductor, Suez Canal, extreme weather, tariffs now coming. And I think on the one hand, it's there's a bit of, well, here we go again, and what have we learned? Yeah. You know, because it's one thing to live through all these crises and get disrupted by them. I think the worst would be if you didn't learn anything from them. So most people coming into the situation this year feel like, well, we need to be ready and we need to be ahead of it. And how can, we need better visibility, we need connectivity to map our tier end supply chain and all of our logistics so we can make decisions faster. In this case, to save substantial money, potentially, if we're talking about moving something before a tariff comes in, or avoiding it, or making a supplier change, or whatever it might be. So I do think that there's something of an impetus now to leverage these tools. And perhaps it's a bit of a happy coincidence that the path that we were on, perhaps to meet certain compliance regulations, for example, to get ahead of human rights issues, where you needed to show at the border, where your tier 2, 3, or 4 came from, and to prove that it didn't come from a forced labor region, for example. Well, now that information can be leveraged elsewhere. Right. So I think on the one hand, there's that pull that, hey, we need to get ahead of these crises, and don't let it go to waste. That's a cliche, but very, very true. And on the other hand, if we break this down in terms of the digital transformation that we're addressing across this event and in so much of our content at Automotive Logistics, it's that you have to do this piece by piece, step by step. Although we all, or many of us, use Gen AI, chatbox, whatever, and have a sense that, wow, AI can do so much so fast, and of course that is true on things, but in the supply chain, you can't just plug that in necessarily. Not if we're talking about using real data from your actual operations to map or optimize. So here you need to have, first and foremost, a data infrastructure, a data lake, where the data is brought together. You need a semantic layer, as it's called, so that the data can understand each other. Yeah. In the automotive industry, that probably means connecting from a mainframe legacy system if you're a traditional OEM, connecting to some cloud services and other systems and tools. This is nothing that nobody doesn't know, but these are the steps in the foundation that are needed. Yeah. Yeah. And when you have that, you can start applying machine learning, data analytical processes to this. And as John Rich from Mazda pointed out, even for companies who maybe haven't yet really applied AI, you actually have the foundation right there. And you probably have people in your organization who will be capable of applying some of these AI tools. So that's the positive takeaway, is that a lot of the foundational work is ongoing, has been ongoing. And I think most companies, because partly of crises, are trying to take an extra step forward to accelerate and really start to leverage this data in a way that will really help them through this current time.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned people, and that's a key area, because whilst this is a technology conference and it is about digital transformation, one of the prerequisites of that is collaboration between different teams, different people, and different organizations, from an OEM straight down to tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and whether it's cybersecurity or whether it's sharing data, there are challenges in that. So what's your thoughts on collaboration and trust issues, I suppose, between the different partners?
Yeah, and I think we can maybe break that down internally and externally. Again, if we're talking about manufacturers, there needs to be a strong cross-sector, or cross-functional collaboration. So as simple as the data team working with the business side, with logistics, and working with the IT teams to understand what solutions are needed, how they should be built, internally or through a vendor with the right interface, etc. And in this case, for the audience we're talking about here, the voice of what the logistics teams need is really powerful. I need visibility of this. I need shipment data. I need freight payment data. And working with the teams to realize that it can't be so siloed that, okay, I put in a service request, it goes to the central IT team, it goes into a queue, there's a resource issue, the response comes back weeks later, a solution is developed 6 months later, it's out of date. It needs. I mean, those days are pretty much over, I would think, but this needs to be done in a very agile way, iterative, step by step. So internally, this cross-functional aspect is growing, and we see really, really specific evidence of that. So, Nissan talked about how the supply chain management innovation team, the sort of in areas like data analytics, this is led by Will Leek and together with Gracia Luna, who is our speaker at their event. This team is now becoming very cross-functional. I mean, it already operated in a cross-functional way with IT and data, but now the same team is part of an integration with purchasing and with manufacturing to bring very similar processes and updates to systems and to skills across those other domains. And it's interesting to note that supply chain management in this case is more mature in this, which in some ways isn't a surprise because the data that's coming through is just so extreme. So that internal collaboration, cross-functional aspect is just accelerating and needs to. Otherwise, to be honest with you, companies are going to be stuck moving very slow.
Yeah.
And then externally, here it's an interesting mix. So on the one hand, if we're talking about supplier mapping and we're talking about monitoring, this doesn't always need to be an active collaboration. This can be, tools and systems that allow OEMs or tier ones to actually check for risks and check for activities, whether it's cyber risk or whether it's weather or financial, and try to be proactive. But also, where they can help and warn the supplier along the way, maybe send a team in actively if there's an area they think they can help them improve. Mm-hmm. I think that aspect maybe isn't so directly collaborative, but the most powerful will be those where the exchange of information and of knowledge, I think, is a commitment on both sides. Yeah. And it's an understanding from be it logistics provider or be it tier one, that by sharing information in a safe and secure way, they will not just fill a compliance requirement, but they will help the supply chain to be stronger. They will help an optimization, and they'll be an active part of it. It does raise interesting questions around potential ways companies are compensated. Mm-hmm. What does optimization mean? Removing routes that I run? I mean, what does that mean? But anyway, I think that needs to be a holistic view, and I think the power of that information is just so clear. Yeah. But we've heard in the events there will be some resistance, and there will be fear, both internally about will this tool take my job? Can I trust it? And externally as well, in terms of, what does my customer really want with that information? And that, I think, needs to be addressed at a personal level, on relationships, and of course on robust processes and agreements that show the trust and security is built into the system.
And talking of trust and security, it's a nice segue into Katrina Expert on our stage. They were talking about data exchange, some use case with Ford and Flex, and that summarizes some of the future of digital strategies and digital transformation. But so my final question really is, where do you think this is going to go in terms of digital transformation itself?
Well, I mean, I think Container-X is and it's exciting to be able to share some of that here in North America. We've obviously been discussing it for a few years in Europe and at our events, but obviously across the industry too. So here we see there's use cases here as well. It won't be the only solution. It's not the only way that companies will exchange data, but I think it's a great example, and some important use cases are going to develop further around it, be it around sustainability, be it around perhaps compliance and other passports and traceability and stuff. And really exciting if it can build into areas like how logistics providers can share the data too. I mean, there's so many areas I can go on this, but I think maybe two to highlight. I think I'm more of the AI enthusiast than I am, kind of pessimist. I mean, it may still take over and destroy the world, but in between, at least, before we get that point, I think if you look at the complexity in the supply chain, and you look at the amount of data that is there, and it's just way beyond, obviously, any human mind to process and make, to always make the best possible decisions. And I think humans will make the most strategic and important decisions on this. But when it comes to identifying a risk at a tier 4 level, when it comes to optimizing design of a supply chain that really considers not just your direct suppliers, but their suppliers and suppliers. I mean, I just think the right models will eventually play a huge role. And if we think about things like engineering changes, when a model goes through an engineering change and it needs to be backtracked through the supply chain and suppliers need to do it, we often see so much obsolescence and cost involved in that. But if there's a tool in which you can actually simulate and model what that's going to be, then one, you might not make that engineering change, or you make it in a different way, just as one example. So I think the scale and amount of data, that there's a huge opportunity for the agentic type models and generative AI models to really help and support people make those decisions. So I see it, but do I think it's immediate? No, because you cannot plug your supply chain data into OpenAI. You need to develop private, secure models and systems to do that. But there's a lot of great activity on it.
Yeah.
And I think the control tower step to digital twin step, is a real one. Sometimes people see us talking about control towers and they think, okay, but that's been around for 25, 30 years, and it's not, and it's true. But we're starting to see these very operational processes and systems integrated with a lot more exciting technology. And I think that will give greater visibility and really help companies. If they're not yet able to be completely predictive, they're reacting much faster and able, in more cases, to mitigate. So I think that will only go further. Will it be a live, immersive digital twin in the way we can imagine it with like a metaverse?
Yeah.
Maybe let's see. But I think we're taking steps to really use that data in strategic ways. So I do see that becoming more of a reality already now and in the next months and years to come.
I mean, in reality, there's lots of challenges, but there's lots of opportunities for OEMs and Tier 1. So we will be back here next year, I'm sure, for Nashville. But in the meantime, thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.